Mabuhay, everyone. Today is June 10, 2021, and it's 6 p.m. here in Manila, Philippines, and I believe it's 11 a.m. in Portugal. So today I have Jennifer Cahill, and I've guested her many times in the show, and I really love connecting with her because of her perspective in doing business and balancing it with being of service to others. And just to give you all a brief background of her, in case this is the first time you're going to hear about her, she's actually an author, speaker, TV and radio host, entrepreneur, and thought leader. She has hosted popular shows with Heart Math Institute, Dr. Deepak Chopra, Dr. Dane here, and many other thought leaders and organizations from around the world. When she is not hosting or speaking, she loves to give back, and actually, she has built two schools, the first one in Nepal and the most recent school in Senegal. And just to give you all an amazing background, one of the things that I admire most about her was, she actually cut her hair, went bald in order to comfort someone who was actually going through cancer. And that's a big deal to me because I'm just really wondering why someone would do that, especially if it's not their problem. So anyway, I'm excited for this interview. So mabuhay, Jen.
Hi, Patnam. Thank you so much for having me here, Reg. It's a pleasure.
Yes, it's always nice to have you on the show. I love the work that you're doing, especially one of the things that I'm preparing for this September is the Harvest Convention that's pioneered by my ministry. And I really love balancing talks on people, planet, and profit. And obviously, you're someone who has done a lot of work on it. And I really would like to see more thought leaders like you, entrepreneurs like you, who has this amazing perspective about people, planet, and profit. And I'm not sure if I mentioned it to you, but one of the most amazing things I learned about you is that you cut your hair for someone who was actually going through something. And I'm just amazed, Jen, that you would go out of your way to do it. And why did you actually do it?
Well, Reg, when I was about 28 years old, I was very passionate about helping people with cancer. My mother, when I was growing up, was a cancer nurse. And, when every day that each and every one of us wakes up and that we're healthy or we have our loved ones around us, these are incredible blessings that I don't ever want to take for granted. So I began fundraising for cancer charities. I think I started throwing birthday parties for charity in lieu of normal birthday parties every other year when I was about 24, 25 years old. And I was invited by the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society to collaborate with them for the Boy and Girl of the Year event. And that year, Tyler Cordova, a young boy who was 7 years old, he had spent 6 of the 7 years of his life fighting cancer when we had met. And at that point, he had been in remission, and then he just got cancer again and was going to have to go back and be bald again. And here he is, a young kid. And so we decided to throw a concert for charity. So there were about 400 people, K-Rock radio station in Los Angeles. We had restaurants on board and other things. And we all came together, and 10 of us shaved our heads in honor of Tyler to show him it was okay. And, we were there in solidarity with him. And my favorite thing, Reg, is that years later, Tyler is now a young man in college. He's healthy and
Wow.
happy. And he said he kept his head shaved for many years after that because for the first time he actually saw it could be cool. And that's the thing is when we come together and we support one another, there's so much more that we can do together than we can do as a single person. When we collaborate for the greater good of another human being or the greater humanity, we can make the difference we want to see in the world.
Yes. And thank you for that, Jen, because it's something that to me is very attractive for another human being because you know how we all get excited about fame and stuff like that. But it's really nice that you're someone who's approachable. Even if you have achieved so much already, you remain down to earth and you genuinely care about a lot of people. And to me, that's very important. In fact, I was having this discussion in my ministry with the whole international metaphysical ministry group. And then recently, because it's Pride Month, a lot of us were discussing the LGBTQ community. And then there were parents who were actually straight. And then I brought it up because something recently happened in the Philippines. A
Mm.
member of the trans community actually passed on violently, and it was also about poverty. And the violence was actually triggered because of poverty situation that the suspects felt they will not be able to handle. So they felt that the best way out was to actually do something like that. So it ties into what we're talking about today, which is people, planet, and profit, because we know that in spirituality, no matter how badly you have done in the past, you actually have spiritual tools to overcome that, overcome the feeling of shame and guilt, and then find spiritual tools to actually turn your life around. And I was so amazed because when I was having this discussion with the parents of the LGBTQ community, they responded so compassionately. And that's the thing about you. I don't know if you even realize it, but you're just naturally compassionate. Even before, when you were organizing the coalition for global meditation, where you gathered thought leaders around the globe. So, what do you think is this quality, and why is it so important to be compassionate? Because it's just so natural to you. You embody it in business. I've seen how you support your friends, especially if things aren't really turning out well for them. And it's funny you're talking about this, but this is actually the thing that's happening right now when it comes to getting getting through situations that are very difficult and challenging for some people. It really is very comforting to have someone like you who's just very compassionate and you know how to reach out to people without draining yourself.
Well,
So
Reverend, our
yeah.
friends are so important. And so I think that what makes a great friend is somebody who is willing to be there. And it's easy. I talk to a lot of my friends, girlfriends, guy friends, every friend I have, and they say that, it really means a lot is that we just kind of reach out. When you are tapped into the energy of the universe and the world, you can almost feel it. You feel like your heart being called to call a friend when they're going through a hard time, and they might not have even told you they were going through a hard time. However, as human beings, it's like there's this beautiful matrix, I heard it once described, of all the energy of every one of us, plant, animal, human, rock. We're all interconnected, energetic beings here on the planet. And when you kind of play or touch into the strings, almost like a harp, that are this matrix of human consciousness that covers the entire planet, then you are going to tap into what's going on halfway around the world, what's going on with a dear friend. And I want to be very frank, Reg. Many years ago when I was very young, I did not have this capacity or this muscle. Compassion is it's a capacity, it's a muscle, it's a way of being that you get to actively choose and participate in. I remember when I was younger, I went through, I'm not sure if I've ever shared this on your show before, but I didn't realize that when I was younger, I had Asperger's or have Asperger's. And I'm high
Mhm.
functioning, but I was always afraid of making a mistake. I was always afraid that I said the wrong thing or didn't know how to interact with human beings in what felt like a normal way. Now, of course, as a growing spiritually minded person, I understand that normal doesn't mean anything. There is no normal. There's just you and me and everything in between. And so that had me become a student of human beings. So because I had to work so hard at flexing that muscle of understanding other people and understanding myself, it allowed me to study human beings and, most importantly, myself, to look internally. And then the more I realized that what I need somebody to tell me I love myself every day. And it's not that I'm relying on you or a friend to do it. I do that for myself every day. I tell myself every morning, just like I did today, that I love and I cherish myself. And what do I need? And the more that you begin to flex that muscle and expand your capacity to be with what you need, the more tapped in that you're going to become to what the people around you need. So it's this beautiful dance that the greater your capacity to heal yourself, the greater your capacity to heal other human beings and to be with whatever happens in the world.
Thank you for sharing that. Which brings me to my next topic, which is, the spirituality of business. Because I think that if you're healing yourself and you become so attuned to whatever the universe needs or what the planet Earth needs. It's a form of healing. Especially, I see business as a very spiritual entity. And in truth, you're actually serving each other. And in that service, whatever the person needs, somehow it's a healing thing because you're fulfilling a need, whatever that may be. And especially you, because you're the owner of Metaphysics. And how did you actually have that, or how did you conceptualize it? What happened?
Well, Reg, it was funny. I went from running a legal recruiting company for over 10 years, which I had just sold at the time. And after selling the company, sometimes your heart and your soul feel compelled to do something new. And I was actually just talking to somebody who had heard me speak at national conferences in the legal industry. And she said, Jen, how did you go from being a legal recruiter and a president of a legal recruiting company to hosting TV shows and writing books and now having another company on healing? And what it was, Reg, is that I realized that what had my company be successful and what had me be successful, not only professionally, but personally, was the integration of spiritual principles in every aspect of our lives. I really don't even want to delineate it and have it be, okay, if you apply this in business, you'll be successful, because how you do one thing is how you do anything. So if I am going to interact with my friends, with myself in a certain way that is thoughtful, compassionate, loving, whatever that might be, why would I not extend that to my business, to everything that I do? So the word meta means to go beyond. So the idea was conceptualized actually about 7 or 8 years before that with a dear friend of mine and thought leader, Shannon Leichner, who's one of the top intuitives in the world. And throughout the whole time that I ran my company, I would always go to one of my probably 10 mentors that I had on spirituality, my Kabbalah teacher, Shannon, my business coach, my vocal coach, Mark Golston. I mean, I had so many coaches and teachers because it's kind of like Henry Ford said, I am not the smartest person. I don't know how to do everything, but I'm going to surround myself with people who are much wiser than I am, who have the wisdom that I need. And in fact, even in our new company that I just created with my business partner, Moon Cho, so I have Metaphysics, which is the metaphysical and business consulting for businesses of how to apply spiritual principles. I also have a new company that's in stealth mode right now with my business partner, Moon Cho. And we're even exploring this idea of having metaphysical board members. So I often will go into a deep meditative state, and if I need wisdom on solving a potential challenge or business opportunity, I will literally meditate on somebody living or dead and ask for their wisdom, because the energy, like I said, that energetic matrix is all around us. And all we need to do is kind of quiet the mind, get rid of that noise and that static that's all around us. And then we can tap into the infinite wisdom that is already all around us, from people who Martin Luther King Jr., Oprah Winfrey, Bill Gates, whomever you might look up to. We can all tap into that, or even a friend halfway around the world. This wisdom and this energy is surrounding us at all times. And our only job is to listen and tap in.
Wow. And that's amazing. By the way, Dr. Ro was saying hello, Reverend and Jennifer
Oh,
Hill.
so Rose.
There's no normal. There's just you, and in between 10 coaches. Wow, that's so huge. So anyway, that's amazing that you brought it up about tapping into you and quieting the mind and being able to reach out to the energy of other people who are much wiser. And that's something that I also follow, especially in University of Metaphysics, where there are a pool of mentors much ahead of me. In fact, yesterday I had one of my teachers, and honestly, for me, I consider you one of my mentors as a millennial. And then with your generation, I think I'm not sure how young you are, but I'm not sure. But I think you also have to look up to someone. Especially for me, I didn't really have any formal training for radio, so I just watch you and Dr. Cindy Palos, and so far that's where I base my interviews from. Especially the content that we have is metaphysics, and something that I want to tie into what we're talking about right now is, in the idea of launching something in this modern world, I think it's so important to be able to use the wisdom of our ancestors for me and be able to honor our ancestors as well, because I think there is such good harvest for you and for everybody involved in your business when you honor the ones that came before you. I'm not sure how you feel about it, but every time I would see you and you talk about your mentors, you also have that way of honoring them in such a way that speaks volumes of them and at the same time what they have done in their craft. And I think this is something that's slowly becoming forgotten. But I think for me personally, I want to continue that legacy, being able to honor people who actually made things easier for my generation to talk about metaphysics and all the other things that matter in the show. And please share with us why you think it's so important, because I see that you do it a lot as well.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Reg, everything that we do is in harmony with the ancestors. It's in harmony with our future selves. There's a great guy, Peter Opperman, who is one of the thought leaders who joined us on the Coalition for Global Unity. And I would highly recommend listening to his future self meditation. I think it was 44 minutes and 44 seconds. And he gives a context of how our past, present, and future selves, we are all intermingled right here. And the same is true of our ancestors. We think of time as linear, though, as Don Hoffman and Deepak Chopra and I have discussed on many of our shows together, time, space-time is dead. It's an extinct idea that no longer serves us. Right now, our brains like to kind of grasp onto this idea of linear time, past, present, future, though in reality, what's happening, all things are simultaneously weaving together, and our brains, because we only have the capacity in this moment to connect to, okay, here's what I'm going to call the present. When we expand out and we move beyond these outdated, antiquated concepts, it's in that moment that we realize my ancestor and my future self are both sitting here. They're both guiding me in this moment. And in fact, in all of the business work that I do, my business partners and I typically do prayers. At the end of every call, we just say, masters, ancestors, guides, future self, thank you so much. Please continue to draw towards us whatever is necessary for the unfoldment of whatever this project is. And one of my favorite prayers to say too is to call upon the ancestors and our future self and our wisdom to remove anything or anyone that is not going to serve us. And that is a level of really being 100% committed to whatever it is you're working on, and simultaneously being unattached to how, who, what that manifests like. And so I think that in order to be in the flow of our future self and our ancestors and our present self, it's being in the dance of realizing that these things are all happening at the same time, and not struggling and being stubborn and holding on to what we think we need, but allowing what our soul needs to come through to us in that moment, and to surrender and let go of the things that no longer serve us.
Wow, that's amazing. And we know that the word surrender is actually difficult for a lot of people. And even I myself, I would find myself in situations where my head brain wants to hold on to patterns and expectations. And it's really a lot to take in when you say you have to surrender. But because of heart math, it has become a lot easier for me to actually just allow for things to happen and not judge myself when things don't go on as planned. And another thing that I also want to bring up, because part of what I picked up from your book, I think your book or one of your interviews, is that you were mentioning that there are certain aspects of ourselves that are more mature, and being able to surrender things for me is also a sign of maturity. And there are also things in ourselves that's still a baby. That there's an inner child crying out for help or something. Please explain more about it, because that's very interesting.
Yeah, so a few years ago, I began doing a talk called How to Deal with Office A-holes or jerks or whatever you want to call it. And in this talk, we created a behavioral matrix where you look at the different ways that perhaps you or somebody in your life might show up in a way that's inauthentic or that might cause harm to somebody. You might be considered a jerk. I tease people and I say I'm a recovering jerk because we all have these components of ourselves. Maybe we're
Yeah.
controlling, maybe we gossip, maybe we get angry or yell at people or yell at ourselves. And so, what I invite people to do is to begin to have compassion for first ourselves and then extend that compassion out to other people. Because what happens is, I invite you that the next time you see somebody who's upset, maybe it's a colleague or a friend or a partner, and they're sitting there and they're just raging, they're angry and they're frustrated. If you can connect to and see that you're actually interacting with a 3-year-old, or maybe a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old, then you can interact with that person from a more loving and compassionate way. If I interact with Rev Reg and you're angry or frustrated
Mhm.
about something, and I treat you as though you're a however old you are person, then I might not have the same level of compassion. But if I see that what's really happening is maybe at the age of 6 years old, somebody didn't give you something you thought you needed, and so you're feeling unsafe and you're lashing out at people, I am going to be able to interact with you in an entirely different way if I treat you with compassion for the 6-year-old self rather than the adult person who's standing here in front of me. And so as we begin to play with and dance with all of these different ages of ourselves and do the work. That's why when I say I do inner child work, every morning as part of my morning prayer and meditation practice, I love to start my day with a gratitude list, then flow into scanning some spiritual text, and then move into my meditation. And as I transition out of my meditation and I send love and prayers out to you and to other people around the world, the last thing I do before I go into my talking to God phase is I actually put my right hand on my heart and I talk to myself. And my inner child prefers to be called sweetheart, but yours might be buddy or, uh, baby, or who knows. We all have things we prefer to be called that nurtures us and has us feel safe. And then I just talk to her and I say, sweetheart, what do you need, my love? Do you know I love you and cherish you? And how are you feeling today? And then when I do that, and then I can bring that side of myself, that healed 5-year-old out into the world, I'm not going to be as reactive. And the funny thing is, Reg, I've noticed it'll be like one day a month where I might just be rushing my spiritual practice. So normally I like to
Mm.
luxuriate and give myself at least a solid hour or two. But let's say I rushed it. And for whatever reason, I skipped doing my inner child work. Like clockwork, Reg, by about, 3 or 4 o'clock that day, I will be having a 5-year-old tantrum. I'll be sitting there, I'll be with my fiance or with a friend or on the phone with somebody. And then all of a sudden, I have broken down. I am cranky, irritable, petulant. And then all of a sudden, it'll dawn on me and I'll say, wait a second, sweetheart, is that you? And it's almost like a little girl is saying, you forgot about me. You ignored me. How could you? And she's the one throwing the tantrum. So when we don't pay close enough attention to ourselves, often that will manifest in a way that could show up as anger, frustration, fear, resentment, uncertainty. And the more that we take, even if it's just 1 minute a day, to acknowledge that still soft part of yourself, whatever age he or she or they might be, that's when you begin to have a greater capacity to be in the world with no matter what happens.
Amazing. And I love that you just mentioned that because I'm not sure if you got it from a mentor, but I think it's uniquely yours because I haven't heard that from anyone. So I think if you actually wrote about it, it can be an entire book, and it's a very interesting thing to accomplish because Jen, I also noticed for myself that the most amazing projects I accomplished for myself were some things that a friend will just tell you that what, this has value, and you actually act on it, and then the amazing thing is it ends up really making an impact to a lot of different people. So I think you should write about it more and do more observations about it because I also had more compassion for myself when I read about it and realizing that I don't have to look good all the time, or especially honestly for the LGBTQ community. I have done so many interviews with the LGBTQ community, and one thing that's recurring for us is the theme where we have to exert extra effort because we feel that we always have to look good because otherwise we won't be accepted. So when I read that part, I realized it's okay that there are portions of me that are like a baby and I throw tantrums. I don't have to hold it all together.
Yeah,
So
and be kind. And then when you see that in another person, first have the self-compassion and then reflect that compassion out to other people in the world. Because when you can see it in yourself, oftentimes when we get angry or irritated with another person, it could be a friend or a stranger or whatever it is, there's a part of that person in ourselves that we haven't yet accepted. And there's a great book called Dark Side of the Light Chasers by Debbie Ford, and she really does an exceptional job about talking about our shadow selves. The more that we can accept the parts of ourselves that might be ugly or dirty or, like you just said, not acceptable, might not be accepted by whomever, the more that we can begin to be with the parts of other people that we don't accept.
yes, and it's such a beautiful thing because now I'm organizing something with my friends, and the part where you actually talk about where you developed your muscle for compassion. It's something that I think is very important to realize that what we learned in school, which was very much head brain oriented, we were very cerebral in our approach to things. And the way you talk about it in your book is actually something that helped me refine a lot of ways, especially in interacting with people. I myself benefited a lot from it. So I trust that the ones I gifted your book to also found it an amazing uh, portion of your book, because something that I always look for books, especially people I admire, is what is it that's uniquely theirs that I can actually copy in my own practices, because I know that if I follow a particular principle, it will also probably make an impact on me, but in my own unique way, in the most appropriate way in my own life. So, another thing that I liked about what you're doing, because I know you're building a third school,
Mm.
you've finished two schools already, and my mom, Dr. Anita Caprice, I call her mom, is also working on it. So, what's the thing about the school, Jen? Because my first course was actually teaching. I'm a licensed teacher. So, I'm just amazed that you're building schools. Why do you want to build schools, and why are you going on for a third school?
Yeah, so many years ago, about probably over 10 years ago now, I read a book called Half the Sky by Nicholas Kristof and his wife. I think they're both Pulitzer Prize winning New York Times journalists. And in the book, they talk about how women hold up half the sky. And they talk about female genital mutilation, sex trafficking, and many other things. And as I read this book, I ugly cried myself to sleep every day. It must have been back in 2009 or 10. And I was just heartbroken that here I am, a white woman growing up in California at the time. And at the time, I think I'd just opened my own company. And I was like, wow, what a gift that I have all this privilege and that I was able to go to school. And yet I ditched school half the time. And I was begrudged and angry and frustrated. Why are you making me go to school? This is stupid. And then you read in the book how the quickest way to prevent sex trafficking, to empower men and females and others around the world is to build schools. It's through education. In fact, just yesterday evening, I was working with the Build On community. So it's buildon.org is who I'm collaborating with to build the third school. And Build On, their CEO, Jim, was on a call with all of us who are going to build. Our goal is to build 8 schools in the next year together. And Jim was sharing a story about a young man who was, his Mateo, I think was his name, in Guatemala or Nicaragua, and how he was trying to get his son across the border because all he wanted for his son was education. And there had been genocide in his village, and there was no way for education to happen. And his son almost died as they were crossing the border to try and get there and provide a better life for his son. And so we don't realize what it's like for people in extreme poverty in different parts of the world where maybe even teachers aren't available or shelters aren't available. And yet what happens is when you build one school, it doesn't just help one set of children. It doesn't just help one family. It helps families for generations to then be able to provide for themselves and for others. There was actually a story about that Jim had shared with me when we met. Jim is the CEO of Build On. When I had met him in 2017 before building my first school in Nepal, Jim sat around a fire and was sharing with about 20 of us the story of one of the first schools that was built in Nepal 25 years ago. So he went back for a celebration to go back to where this original school was built. And as he went back, he gave this beautiful talk and the ceremony in a school. And now the villagers themselves had built three other schools. And outside of this school, though, Reg, there was one man who was kind of like hunched over and standing outside the door. And he said, "Sir, would you like to come in?" And the man kind of shook his head and said no. And so after Jim was done delivering the speech, he went out and he said, "Sir, excuse me, but were you one of the people who helped build this first school here in Nepal 25 years ago?" And the man just kind of looked down and shook his head. Yeah, I was. And he said, "Oh, well, sir, tell me about it. Were you on site? What was it like?" And the man just kind of shook his head and was very embarrassed. And he said, "I apologize. I wanted my children to be able to go to school because I knew it was the only way to help them. But I could only help build the school once every 11 days. Now, the build of the school takes about 3 months." And so Jim said, "Well, sir, can you tell me why were you only able to help once every 11 days? Because part of why I love Build On, it's about the villagers helping. The villagers help provide the cement and they provide the labor, so we all work together." And Reg, what wound up happening is the gentleman said, "Well, sir, you see, I was a slave and I only got 1 day off every 11 days. And I wanted to spend that 1 day helping give my kids a better life because one of his children had cerebral palsy and he knew he would die in that village and wouldn't even make it to 18 if he didn't get him an education and help him further his life." And here, 25 years later, he said, "Sir, I want you to know my son not only graduated from your primary school, he helped to build the future schools, and he eventually got into Kathmandu University and now runs a bank in Nepal. And this is a young
Wow.
man who might have otherwise died." And so I feel so humbled and grateful to be able to be a woman who owns a company and has owned a company before, and anything that I can do to support he, she, they, whomever it might be in the world, with helping have a dream, have the resources to be able to make choices that can empower you, your family, your village, whomever it might be. And it's just really an honor and a privilege. And I plan to build schools for the rest of my life, at least one every other year.
Wow, amazing. I almost cried. Jen, I'm a product of someone who also sent me to school when my dad passed on, and I don't think I would have been able to, develop my consciousness the way it is now if not for other people helping me, especially my mom had a tough time raising four children. And the three of us were going to college, and I went to one of the best colleges here in the Philippines. So thank you for doing what you're doing. And at the same time, I really love that you brought it up because a lot of people don't even want to talk about it, especially the thing that you mentioned about one of the best ways to get people away from violence like rape and other things is to build a school. I really believe that. Especially one of my favorite influencers and thought leaders is Neil Gaiman. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, but he said that, if you want to minimize violence, we have to teach people reading. And naturally, people learn how to read in schools. And I'm just lucky that my mom paid enough attention to me that I was able to learn how to read. But the rest, of course, was in my school already. So yeah, and it's amazing, Jen, because this thing that you're doing, one of the reasons why I love what you're doing, when I first moved to Manila, which is the city part of the Philippines, I was only speaking in Waray. It's
Wow.
a dialect in the Philippines. So, I really had a hard time learning how to speak English. And at one point, I got a line of seven, but my mom was so patient with me that from that quarter, she was able to help me make it to 99 over 100. And
Wow.
yeah, it was so amazing that even I was uh, so grateful that my mom paid enough attention. And of course, the teachers were very helpful as well because coming from someone who was just enjoying the leisurely way of life in the province, And then I had to move to the city, which is Manila. And it was very stressful for me as a kid who just moved here. But
Wow.
yeah, that's the amazing thing about having a school. And at the same time, I had the exposure to teach in a public school and the private schools and the international schools here in the Philippines. So this type of work that you're doing, I'm so grateful that you have that kind of heart to actually reach out to people that aren't necessarily connected to you. And Jen, in the healing world, I know a lot of teachers that say, you know what, you should just mind your own business. That's not your problem. It's not your karma to fix. What can you say about it? Because for you, it's, I mean, you're in Portugal, you can just enjoy and you travel around the world in luxurious places. You can actually just forget about all these. So why are you doing it?
Well, honestly, Reg, I feel compelled as the Kabbalistic teachers, for example, like David Guillaume, who I've studied with, taught me. When you have a thought, when you have an idea or an urge, in my case, to build a school, it's because the universe put that urge in your head, in your heart. More often, it's our heart or our soul, like you know with heart math, that we really want to listen to deeply. And I understand we all have a different path. My path is different than your path, which is different than many of our viewers' paths. And there is no right or wrong. Some people's path might be to support their family locally. It might be to have a great job and to be successful at that job and to make a difference in whatever work they do. There is no right or wrong. I think that the most important thing, Reg, is to listen to our soul and to hear what our soul is trying to tell us. And I know that could I just sit around? And trust me, it has occurred to me when I went to open up this latest company I was working on in the United States. Labor laws and owning a company, there is a lot of risk involved in it. And I had sworn to the universe, I had sold my first company and I was just luxuriating around Paris. I was literally going for 8-hour walks every morning, stopping by cafes, eating croissants, walking or running along the Seine, minding my own business when poof, the universe dropped an opportunity in my lap to create a new startup with my business partner. And at the time, I thought, gosh, do I want to give up my 8-hour walks and croissants and everything? And it doesn't have to be a giving up. It just felt like my heart and my soul were being called to do more. And much like building the schools, as much as I can enjoy staying at a luxurious 5-star resort, I don't ever want to take that for granted. I don't ever want to take it for granted that I have the privilege of sleeping in a bed or of having food to eat or running water or a toilet. And so part of the reason too that I feel compelled, I want to, number one, help people and prevent sex trafficking. But number two, the other reason why is I want to remain balanced. If somebody were to give you all the most opulent luxury and you had that and nothing else for the rest of your life, you wouldn't be able to appreciate it. And that's why a lot of spiritual teachers I know say that, the people who have gone through the greatest hardship and the greatest darkness are also the ones who go on to reveal the most light. You need to have the light to experience the dark and vice versa. You need to experience, great good and sometimes great hardship. And if you don't open yourself up to all of it, that's why from when I was very young, I've enjoyed traveling around the world. My parents used to take me to Mexico when I was very young to help some of the families down there. And so it was instilled in me from a very young age that I am grateful that I have food to eat, I have love, I have a roof over my head. And it feels almost unjust and unfair to keep that for myself. Those are blessings that I intend for every human being on the planet to have. And until I wake up one day and know that every human being is provided for, every human being has clean water, a roof, food, education, then my work isn't done.
Amazing. So, I'm just very grateful that there's someone like you that actually exists, because a lot of teachers would say that that's not your problem, and in fact that's their karma. So you shouldn't actually be minding their business because that's not your business. And honestly, for me, I mean, I respect everyone's point of view, especially I have the show perspective, so I'm supposed to expand my capacity to appreciate the diversity of opinions. But I'm so amazed that you would go out of your way and think about it, because some teachers would say the fact that it's not even happening to you you thinking about it, you're just bringing it in your awareness. What can you say about it?
Well, there's two aspects to this, Reg. A lot of thought leaders, you might look at somebody in the media. You might look at a thought leader, for example, like Deepak Chopra, or maybe somebody who is famous as a singer or an actor. And you might think, oh, I want to be like that. I'm so jealous. That would be so cool. But if you look at it from a spiritual standpoint, when somebody like a Deepak or an Angelina Jolie or whomever it might be is in the spotlight, it's because they have lives to touch. They have lives to transform. And I personally believe in past lives, and I've experienced what some of my past lives were. And in my case, I know that I I did cause harm to people in past lives, emotionally, spiritually, whatever it is. And I remember I had a doctor years ago who I said, "Why do you do what you do, Charles?" And he said, "Because I'm pretty sure I cut people up in a past life. So in this lifetime, I have to come back and repair them." So sometimes some of us who are like you or me or whomever out there doing a lot of work with a lot of people, it's because we have healing to do, healing in this karma, healing in the world and the work we're meant to do. And to the point of the spiritual teachers that you're talking about, that I do want to touch on, that's very critical, is the Kabbalists say you never want to give someone something that they're not able to receive. For example, if I were to give you or your audience advice and it was unsolicited and they weren't open to it, or you weren't open to it, it would cause more harm than good. Just like if I were to give if I were to give a man who is thirsty water and to drown him, it wouldn't help him. Or if I kept giving out of a cup and then I had nothing left, that wouldn't help me. So it's really important to always ask, why are we giving? Are we giving for attention? Are we giving for notoriety? Are we giving to look good, whatever it might be? Or are we giving because we're being called to from a soul level? So when I'm really thoughtful and at my best, and I'm not going to say I'm there 100% of the time, if I'm lucky, I might be there 40% of the time. However, when I'm at my best, before I do anything, even joining you today for the interview, Reg, I actually ask the universe and the soul of the universe and my soul, and I say, is it in my highest and best good to do this interview with Rev Reg? Is it in my highest and best good to give this to this person or to build this next school? So nothing I do when I'm at my highest and best is reactive. It's all intertwined with the universe and always in a conversation with God, the universe, source, about what is in my highest and best good. And I have canceled plans. I'll check in with the universe every morning when I talk to God or journal with God. And I'll say, universe, what would you like me to do? Do you want me to do this? Do you have a different plan for me? Is this in my highest and best good? And sometimes I will hear no exclamation point, or wait, or change. And it's about the listening, because when we do things without first actively participating and talking to the universe, our soul, the souls of others, you can cause harm to yourself and others. But that's why you get to first dance with what your soul needs, what the soul of humanity needs, and how you get to intertwine the two.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing it. And something that I have observed, especially you talked about people who are already very popular, people who have influence, and something that I was asking myself, because honestly, for me, I just want to get things done. It doesn't matter to me if I have a show or not. I'm still gonna do the principles that I've learned. But I realized that there also comes a point in your life where sometimes your influence is also your gift to the universe, because you already have influence. Like what we're doing now. In the past, you know, especially in my family, because the building a school, for example, it makes you look good, and people would think, uh, you're just doing it because it makes you look good, and it adds more value to your name, things like that, comments like that. But then I realized, when a person takes on leadership positions, because you can be a leader because you have influence, and that particular influence, you have that capacity to attract people into your cause.
Mm.
And it's something that I think is very important to balance. That's why I have you here today, because for me, it's so important to have someone who has that balanced perspective on, profit, people, and planet. Especially, this is the first time, Jen, I heard from you that the reason why you're building the school is you want to actively participate in creating a safer environment and a more empowered environment for children, women, and even men, because education will keep their focus away from anything that's the polar opposite of it. So,
Exactly.
yeah. So, how do you handle that, Jen? Especially you're a public figure. People sometimes question uh, your reasons for doing it. How do you handle it? Especially this is the third school that you're building.
Yeah, it's a great question. And just like the show that we did back, I think it was in December with Dr. Anita, who you mentioned, sometimes I do look at it, Reg, and I ask myself, why am I sharing this? And if the reason that I'm sharing it, in fact, right as you and I went live, as we were starting to go live, I said an internal prayer that one of my teachers taught me to say, David, actually, Guillaume. And he said, listen, anytime as a thought leader, as an influencer, that you're about to do a show or speak on a stage or help somebody, you want to make sure that the only attention and energy you receive comes from source. So when I'm at my highest and best self, I always go internal and I'll either say out loud or internally, and I'll say, universe, source, I do not want to receive energy or attention from anyone. I don't want it from Reg. I don't want it from the audience. I only want the attention, the sustenance to come from the light, from the creator. And when you turn it over to that and you surrender and let go of the looking good aspect, that's where you get to look at it. And sometimes we're human beings, Reg. Sometimes we do want to look good. Sometimes, there was a period where Deepak and I were doing a show early on. I think it was one of our third or fourth episodes. And I remember that Deepak said, Jen, I'm going to direct this show. And I was like, okay, Deepak, you do you. And as Deepak was kind of going about the show and we got about half hour in, I just said to the universe, I said, universe, listen, I love Deepak. He has great stuff to say. But if it's not in my highest and best good, if I'm not going to add value, I don't want this just to look good. If I can make a difference in a way that's going to contribute to humanity, then use me and let me be a part of this. If not, please remove this opportunity from my life. And at the end of that show, Reg, it was so funny. Deepak, had been talking most of the show with Dawn, and he turns to me and he says, Jennifer, what are your thoughts? And I was like, okay, so I am a part of this. And then I just shared what kind of came from my heart. And after that, we wound up doing another 13 or 14 episodes. And it's about always letting go of the egotistical aspect of I want to be in the spotlight. I want this to look good. And so it's about constantly being in inquiry, being curious. Am I coming at this from an authentic choice of wanting to contribute to humanity? Or am I coming at this from a selfish place? And it's just an opportunity to play with it. I love that, Ro. Thanks for commenting.
Yes, thank you for that. Indeed, Dr. Rowe, she's actually a sociologist as well, and she just made a comment for those who are listening. Awesome. The only attention and energy I want to receive from the universe, light, the creator. I love that, Jen. So, yeah, and it's such an amazing thing to talk about it because I think it's part of social intelligence and being able to maintain your human dignity. Because honestly, Jen, many times, even if I have a lot of shows or do a lot of interviews, there's always a part of me that feels a bit nervous doing it. So, in fact, when we first talked to each other through email, honestly, if not for the necessity of it, I prefer to just, stay in the background and just get things moving, especially that particular aspect where people question your sincerity. So that's very helpful. Especially, I find it so important to talk about this because as you keep going about your business, I remember this ATM teller in the bank I used to work for, and then she was so quiet. She didn't want to get promoted. She was so good at what she was doing, and she didn't want to take on a boss role. But because she was so good at what she was doing, of course, people were intrigued at her. So her popularity grew in the space, and then everybody was asking for her help how to balance things. So I think for me, when people are influential, it's also divinely ordained that somehow the creator really puts them there because of the multiplied good that can actually pass on through them because of how consistent they are with what they're doing. Especially you doing this for the third time is actually amazing. And how does your husband support you with it? Because I mean, you're doing a lot of work and then you're doing a lot of community service. So, wow, I'm just amazed that, he can hold space for you with all the stuff that you're into.
We laugh, Reg. It's funny you say that. Every morning we have a prayer practice every morning and evening that we do together. And it was a dream of mine. I was married once before, and my ex-husband was instrumental in my growth and development. I would not be the human being I am today if it weren't for him. And I remember my ex-husband said to me one day, this is long before we got a divorce, he said, Jen, don't you want somebody who would pray with you every day? Because my ex-husband was more of an atheist. And I never even thought that would be a possibility. So it kind of cracks me up, Reg, because when my fiance and I do our prayers together, it normally takes like 20, 30 minutes in the morning. And so I had this show and a call with somebody else beforehand. And so he just brings a lot of laughter into it. So we'll say our prayers, but he's constantly joking and making me laugh. So he helps me to stay grounded and not get caught up in my head. Because sometimes it's easy to get I'm very regimented. Like you cannot stop me from saying my prayers and doing my morning meditation. Like I do not miss a day. I haven't for 8 or 9 years now. But he's great about bringing the play and fun. And it's like kind of the yin and the yang energy. And that's the great thing about having a partner is that they can hold space and they can also kind of tease you in a loving way to, if you're being too hard on yourself, to kind of jokingly make you laugh or tickle you or just make you come back down into the real world. Because I tend to I just love playing in time and space and the ethereal. And so sometimes I have to get grounded back here in the physical. And, so if somebody tickles me or I'm laughing, it kind of brings me back more into the material world to remind me that I am a human being having a human experience, which is why we're all here, right?
Yes, and I love that you talked about it because, maybe next time when I guest you on the show, our topic will be having it all.
Yeah, and that's what I want for everybody, Reg. I think we all can have it all. It is possible, and it's not about being perfect. It's about how do you get to connect to the magic of the universe. I was just pre-recording an interview with a thought leader named Lion Goodman yesterday, I think it was, and he had a great quote from Henry Ford on his ebook that you can download from his website, and it was that if you think you can, or if you think you can't, you're right. And even for me to get back into Portugal, like I just did, I'm a US citizen. According to everything you read on the news, everything you would read out there in the world, it says US citizens are not allowed in Portugal. So when I was arriving on the plane on Sunday from London, I literally sat there with my fiance and I said, let's just surrender it to the universe. Universe, if it is your will for us to be in Portugal, let us get through with ease and effortlessly. If not, please redirect us to whatever country in the world you'd like us to be in. And it was just effortless. When you believe that things are working out in your highest and best good, they do. But if you have fears and doubts and you say you can't, you'll also be right. It just depends on what reality empowers you.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. And I love that you're just surrendering to, the greater good, the highest possibility for both of you. And at the same time, another thing that you mentioned, which I think is very important, is, allowing that space where you're not being hypnotized by whatever it is that you just read about or heard about. Because I think a lot of important things that you're supposed to accomplish in life really comes from the guidance of your heart and not just hearsay.
Yeah.
If I count a lot of the things that I've heard and the things that took risk on because I followed my heart, a lot of the most fulfilling breakthroughs I had was coming from the guidance of my heart and not the things that I heard about, you know, whatever it is you heard about the news or from some people. So please tell us more about it because I think this is something that we take for granted. But the amazing breakthroughs in life, it doesn't just happen because it's in the news, but you actually had that heartfelt connection that that guidance is truly for you.
Yeah, honestly, Raj, it just comes from talking to the universe. It's about surrender. And that's why I think talking to God, everybody has different ways that you can communicate with whatever you call the divine, whatever you call source energy. For some people out there, it might be journaling. I love to write. I love to have God or the universe, whatever you want to call it, interpret my dreams. And in fact, just the other night, I had a fascinating dream because I was, I had a dream that I was kind of floating above. I was at this beautiful spiritual place with other people out in the middle of a desert. And the next thing you know, Reg, I'm kind of floating like above people, and I see friends and I'm like, whoa, whoa, what's going on? Why am I here? Why? And I saw somebody I know and I was calling out to her. And so I asked the universe, I said, why am I having this dream? And the universe, clear as day, said, it's because when I dropped down in the dream, I was so afraid of being at this higher level that I dropped down. And the moment I dropped down, I dropped into fear and jealousy and anger. And so the message was that it's okay to hold a higher frequency, and that lower frequency and vibration emotions like anger, greed, fear, jealousy do exist. And that we can actually be up here and we can invite people up to the higher frequency and still be a human being, but it doesn't mean that we have to lower our vibration. And so I go to this, Reg, because it's so important for us to connect to source, to get that clarity we want. You can journal with the universe, you can pray with the universe, whatever works. And, there's so many different ways to do it, but then you're connecting to the infinite wisdom of everything all around us. And you just kind of get curious and say, is it in my highest and best good? And one of my favorite prayers I say every morning is I say, universe, please know I'm going to make plans with the highest and best of intentions. However, if for any reason these plans are not in my highest and best good or that of humanity, I give you permission to lovingly, easily, and effortlessly redirect these plans. And please give me the wisdom to know when this is happening.
Wow. That's such a powerful thing to say because, one of the things that you're talking about recently in our group of metaphysical practitioners was the idea of changing your narrative and how your narrative can actually increase the quality of your life or how it can actually limit the quality of your life because you're entertaining all those limiting emotions that you just mentioned, jealousy, and all the other similar frequencies that come along with it. And in fact, the reason why I love doing the heart math meditations and using the Global Coherence app is because it helps other people who are skeptic about meditation how the inner conversations that we have, whether they are self-limiting or they have become recurring conversations because you heard it on the news and you think it's the basis for reality, and then you actually create experiences in your life where you feel limited, sad, or nervous because of what you heard on the news. I find it so amazing that you have that kind of narrative, Jen, that will be able to help you lift your consciousness above the level of whatever it is that people think is the so-called reality from the collective, which is normally full of fear, lack, and doubt. So, like you mentioned before, you were a recovering jerk rather. So I'm very sure that your narrative back then, the way you chose your words, was so different from how you're actually conscious of it now. Can you explain to us more about it? Because words is so easily available to us, but most often than not, we take it for granted.
Yeah. Yeah, so, our internal and our external dialogue are so powerful. In fact, I'm creating a new program with my vocal coach and mentor, Arthur Samuel Joseph. He's worked with some of the greatest thought leaders of our time, Tony Robbins, and he's currently working with Dwayne Wade, the basketball player. And so Arthur and I are creating a program called 28 Days to Command Your Destiny. And right after this, I'm going to be recording some excerpts for that program where it's going to be 28 days of 1-minute videos of how people are going to learn how to command their destiny. And one of the things, the exercises that I'll give your viewers a little excerpt from is to actually have committed listeners in your life. And what that means is to have somebody in your life, it could be a friend, somebody you trust, a family member, maybe a colleague, and to have that person write down, they could write it on a notepad or on a phone, the things that you say often that maybe aren't in your highest and best good. For example, you might have a friend who says, oh, it's so hard, or I can't, or it's challenging, or I'm tired, or nothing ever goes my way, whatever it is. And the job of this committed listener friend is to help you kind of be accountable for it and just make little notes. And at the end of each week, and you could do it for that friend in return, I believe in reciprocity and synchronicity, is then at the end of that week, you go back through and you say, Is this what I'm committed to? Am I committed to being tired? Am I committed to not having enough? Am I committed to being afraid or uncertain? And if you're not committed to that, then you get to use your words to begin to craft your destiny and to step into that destiny by painting a new picture with the words that you use. So, for example, instead of saying I'm tired, you might just want to say, I'm feeling more vivacious than I have for the rest of the week, or I'm feeling happier or revitalized. And you begin to shift from that which you don't want to that which you do want. However, step one is to bring conscious awareness to the conversations you're having. And I have literally worked with thousands of people, Reg, and there's been one sentence that I'll often hear somebody say, and I'll point it out to them. I'll say, hey, can I share something with you? And they'll say, yeah. I'll say, what if we shifted that one sentence from, oh, it's not going to work out, and I don't know how I'll ever find my dream job, to, I don't know how it's going to work out, but I am fully committed by the end of this year, I'm going to be living my life's purpose. And when you shift one sentence a day and you do that for 30 days and you transform that, you are going to transform your destiny. And that's why I'm really excited about this new program we're creating.
Thank you for that, Jen. It's such a beautiful thing. And I also read about it in your book. You mentioned something about words that without it, you wouldn't really have this world. I'm not able to memorize it, but something like that, that the time space reality that we're occupying now, words actually have a lot of, have a lot of power why we're in this time space reality. So, anyway, I really would love to continue this conversation, but I know you also have some appointment to go to. And, in this perspective show, I always ask my guests, what's the one perspective you want to leave with us and that we can actually take immediate action?
That life is miraculous and that everything happening around us is a miracle. The fact that you and I are on different parts of the world, thousands of miles apart, and that people from most countries around the world can be listening to us right now is a miracle. And so, what if you wake up tomorrow and you wake up and you say, wow, I'm breathing today? That is a miracle. I wonder what other miracles will unfold. So, I invite everybody out there, I invite you to play with the idea that everything that happens to you is a miracle, and to look for the miracles and to write them down every day. Oh, I can't hear you, Reg. Hold on.
Awesome. Awesome. Anyway, Jen, we want to support you in your work. So if people want to contribute to your school, where shall people go and make that donation?
Great. So what I would recommend is I'll go ahead and post it on my Instagram today for people to use that link. And it's going to be Jen Hill Speaker is my Instagram. Again, that's Jen Hill Speaker. And as soon as we wrap up the interview, then I'll go ahead and then I'll go ahead and post it out there along with the link on Build On. And every dime that people donate makes such a big difference. I mean, you don't know the difference that you're going to make not only for the children who are going to attend today, but the children decades from now and the families they're going to impact.
Yes, thank you for that, Jen. And Dr. Ru was just saying, look for miracles and write them down every day. I like that, Jen.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Jen. It's always lovely to have you here on the show. And I trust to have you again. And let's talk about having it all in life because you're obviously the example of it.
Thanks, Reg. Lots of love to you and to everybody out there. Wishing you a day, a week, a year, a lifetime filled with miracles.
Thank you so much. And such a lovely day. Let's have more of this universe.
Cheers. Thanks, guys.
So, Satnam, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. It's so nice to have Jen in our show. We always pick up a lot of things that we can use immediately. And I know that it's in taking action that we make a lot of, changes that we want to experience in life. Remember to put things in perspective because your perspective shapes your reality. Mabuhay, everyone, and have fun.